Yeah, that's fine. I don't have to look at ourselves.
Yeah, because
we know what we look like.
It gets hard for me. Okay. Welcome back to Battleborn Baddies, the podcast where grace meets grit and real women rise. I'm Marky.
And I'm Melissa. Today is just the two of us sitting down with a heart to heart and something we all know too well, which is the weight that we all carry.
So we're talking about the hard stuff today, the invisible loads that we've carried, often hauled behind smiles that we are just fingers crossed faking till we make it. The moments that nearly broke us and the strength that built us one hard day at a time.
Because behind every "you're so strong" is a story people don't quite always see. And today we're sharing ours.
Yeah, or at least parts of it.
Trying.
A little bit of it. So we're just kind of, we talked about this earlier, you know, we really wanted to just kind of like define a moment of that brings us back to when we look back and we're like, God, I was carrying the weight at that time. And so, you know, I could think of, the suicide of my husband, my youngest son going to prison, the work that we've both been in where it's very male dominant. And at times that could be challenging. Motherhood is a beautiful thing, but motherhood is challenging.
Oh, Lord.
Because your son may end up in prison, and that's hard as a mom, you know.
And he's so young.
Yeah, he's young, fresh out of high school. And so a breakdown can definitely become a breakthrough. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the key to life.
Yeah.
When you're in the thick of it and you are literally on that brink, you're like, you've really got to get the mindset to look for the positive, to find something that's going to give you some strength there, something that's going to make you smile, something that's going to give you some hope, something that's going to help you set a goal. You know, when my son was sentenced, you know, the first 3 months he'd call me, like I couldn't even talk on the phone because I cried. I cried the whole 30 minutes. And then after I got off the phone, I cried for 2 hours because I was like, I just, you know, that poor kid's sitting there in prison and this is what and he jokes about it now. I mean, he's not out yet, but we got 11 months to go. But it's like, he's like, man, Mom, all you did was cry, you know, and I'm like, I know, but I'm good now, you know. But that what helps us keep going during those times, and sometimes it's
other people.
Yeah.
Just knowing other people have been through it, have their own struggles, you're not alone.
And when they have the strength to talk about it to you.
Yeah.
To help you realize, because for me, when my son went to prison, there was a strong element of shame for me. I was ashamed that I had a child in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I was ashamed that me as a parent made major mistakes.
Wrong.
Well, you know, and I did. I mean, I didn't raise my kids in the greatest environment growing up, and I will own that. But when somebody comes at you and says, listen, and so here's this deal. This guy met me at my broken point, and he messaged me in Messenger, and he'd been a longtime family friend, and he's like, Marky, quit. You cannot beat yourself up and I was drinking a little too much at that time because I was working construction. I was camped out in a fifth wheel trailer clear up in Elko, Nevada, working 13-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
And I was broken. Yeah. And so, you know, it probably spilled over into Facebook a little bit here and there. Who knows? But evidently it did.
Yeah.
Because this poor guy was like,
oh,
I need to talk to her.
Right.
But he's like, you did the best you could at the, with the tools you had to use at that time. That was key for me to be like, give myself a little grace. I wasn't perfect. I made huge mistakes, but I did love my children, and I did do the best I could with what I had to work with, you know.
Yeah.
So it's who or what helped you keep going. And if you really take the time to kind of like make a mental note of the time you were carrying the weight, the breakdown that became a breakthrough, how did it become a breakthrough? You know, who or what helped you keep going?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's people. In my experience, and I know yours as well, it's always God. God's always the biggest key
Absolutely.
element of the strength that
Yeah.
kept us going.
Yeah.
And neither one of us are like, super like religious, Bible packing people, but we definitely have a strong sense of spirituality and faith
Absolutely.
in God.
God has got me through a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. And there have been times that I've been super angry at God.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's like being mad at your parents, right?
Yeah.
You just want to like ignore them. You don't want to talk to them. Sometimes you feel ashamed. And that's kind of how I feel with God too, right? And we had just gone through something super traumatic, and the Sunday before this occurred, we were at my Bible study with the church that I go to, and the topic was, have you ever been so angry at God that you turned away from him? You stopped reading your Bible. You stopped talking to him. And I remember thinking, I'm like, not really. Like, what could ever make me so angry to turn me away from God? And then 2 days later, like, my world was rocked. And no, I think it was the next day.
Oh,
it was
wow.
the very next day. And I got the most horrific phone call of my life. And I remember that was a Monday. And then on Tuesday, I just had this breakdown. And I was so angry at God. I just was like thinking, I'm like, we were just talking about being, things happening to you, and you turn away from God because you're angry. And I thought I would never do that. And I was just put into that situation, and I'm like, I am so angry at God right now. Like, how could this happen? And I remember just thinking, like, I can't believe we just were talking about this the day before, and here I am. My heart is shattered, and I keep trying to read the Bible, and I just couldn't, And we're human, right? We get angry. It's like being angry at your parents. Like, you just like turn them away. You stop talking, or anyone for that matter, right?
Yeah.
You just want to shut down and ignore the problem.
Yeah.
When in reality, you have to face the problem. You have to turn to God or your people or whatever it is, and you just really have to face it and take it head on. And it's really hard.
And it's much easier to take it head on when you have God by your side.
Yes,
when you're
so
packing that
easier.
Strength with you. Yes.
Absolutely.
And you're leaning in on those words of the Bible, like, one of the things that I hold on to all the time. The same strength that rose Jesus from the dead lives in you. It lives in me. It lives in every one of us. So when you're in the thick of it, you're going to try to tap into that a little bit, because I think it would be a wise time to try that one out, but
sure.
there's always the snares that trip us up and trigger us into other mindsets.
I feel like Satan thinks that this is his chance to get in and divide you. Like, you are at your lowest moment, and that's when, evil, Satan, whatever you want to think, really tries to take advantage of the situation, because
whether it's being angry or like testing you. Temptations.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we all have our little weakness, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And we know here it comes.
Yeah.
And no matter what your faith is, or your religion, or your spirituality, or even if you don't believe in God and all those things, I mean, that's fine. But I think that we all could agree that when the chips go down, there is a wide array of things that pop
Yeah,
up out of nowhere,
yeah.
and you are literally going through the jungle, and you got to determine very carefully what your next move is.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that is so I mean, for us, it's God. You know, I think that as this podcast airs, we hope to hear from, you know, you guys, the audience, like what it is for you. And if it doesn't, you know, if it's not God, that's fine and that's fair, and we'd still love to hear your story, because we're not here to we're not here to shove our religions or beliefs down anyone's throat. That's just what works for us. And you know, and let's talk about letting go.
Yeah.
And as a woman, and I can't speak for men, but I look forward to getting men on the podcast, because I really want to know more, like open, genuine, heartfelt conversation about what men, when they have their moments where they're like, I had to let go, or I was doing it all. I was carrying all the weight. Yeah. And I want to know, I want us to have that conversation with men, because we don't have that enough. No. And I think, and I have a strong, sincere, like, consideration towards men and what they go through.
Me too, because they tend to hold it in more than women.
Because culturally they're supposed to, and I think that's sad.
It's not okay.
No,
they're human too.
Yes. And I think a lot of times it comes up about men, you know, their parental rights, like. And how they're so easily alienated from their children's lives, and all it's not right.
No.
And we could say, oh, but he was a deadbeat dad. Okay, cool. They are out there, and nobody is going to deny that.
But there's deadbeat moms too.
Exactly. And you know what? I heard 30 years ago, Dr. Laura, she's a little hardcore. That girl could get a little spicy, but she said, I don't care if he's deadbeat dad.
He still has a right.
You slept with him. Mm-hmm. You created a child together.
Right?
Regardless, he's half of that child.
Yeah.
You're going to have to learn how to bridge that gap.
Absolutely.
The best you can.
That's right.
You can't get, you know, and I tend to fall into that side of things, because
me too.
I've had experience with it.
Me too.
I've had experience with it as a child, and I've had experience with it with my children.
Yep.
You know, so I leaned in more on bridging the gap. That was my choice. But again, if that's not your choice or that's not your story, we want to hear it, because that's what we're here for. We're here to uplift each other. We're here to break through the barriers of internalizing our tough points in life and our struggles, to where we're open and candid about it, and we share what helps us, because collectively, as a group of people just out here on this big rock spinning around, you know, we can all help each other grow and learn and do better.
Ultimately, we have similar experiences. Yes. While they may not be the same, we still struggle with issues.
Yes.
And I feel like coming together and sharing our stories helps people realize that they're not alone. They're not the only ones going through it, because we all go through it.
Yeah.
You know, no one's perfect. Trying to act like you have a perfect life or the perfect family is, I think, harder than trying to, you know, you just need to face reality.
100%.
And be real about it.
Yeah. But there's beauty in that too, in my opinion.
There's vulnerability.
Yes.
And it's hard.
And when you are like really struggling, and you've got these private little things that you don't feel comfortable sharing with anyone, whether it's your marriage or relationship or children or health, you know, it's like, I don't want to be negative Nancy out there. Oh my God, look what's happening to me, and this sucks. But when you hold it, when you encounter that strength within yourself, where you hold it together and you stay steady till this windstorm passes over,
Right.
there is a lot of beauty in that strength, and I always really respect that when I see men and women both,
Oh,
they didn't
absolutely.
talk about it. They
They
didn't
weathered
run
the
anybody
storm.
down. They didn't get weak.
Yeah.
That's a big, um like marker for me to go. I like look at those people and I think I want to be more like that, when the next time comes around. And I recently had a good friend of mine, and he was struggling, mentally with a situation on his land, and nobody would listen to him about it, and it was getting the best of him, and he started drinking, which is
Mm.
not unlike him. He don't drink. And he went through that, and I just said, well, I'm proud of you for standing in your truth, and whatever, instead of letting people push you into the little spot where they want you to be in. But then, and he struggled hard
Yeah.
for a good month or so, hard, like mentally hard. And he finally said, I had to let it go because I'm losing all the joy in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, this brings me to another thought. Like, when we're struggling like that, we need to reach out to each other. Like, if
Right.
you're a fellow believer,
Mm-hmm.
our thing would be like, can we pray with you?
Right.
What can
Absolutely.
I do to help you? Encourage. And I felt like we could do better by just stepping into that light of encouragement. Let me encourage you right now. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's talk about joyful things right now. Like with somebody, I mean, you got to get some things off your chest at times, but to dwell on the negative or focus on
Oh,
that is
yeah.
only going to magnify it,
It's
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
But if you look outside of that one dilemma at everything else, sometimes we can get zoned in, hyper
Mm-hmm.
fixated on the dilemma,
Yeah.
that we start missing the beauty that's still taking place around us. And this world
Right.
moves fast.
It's the mindset.
Yes.
If you just make yourself look to the positive of what's going on rather than the negative, it's going to change your mindset
Yeah.
actually, always being negative. I mean, I feel like it's like I don't even know how to explain it. If you're thinking negative all the time, negative things are going to
Yep.
happen to you. If you're trying to stay positive and be upbeat about no matter what situation you're going through, things will get easier. It's not going to change the situation, but your outlook on the situation is going to be so much better
And
than
it's going to
trying to
lighten
be
the load.
negative.
It's going to
Yes,
lighten the load. And
absolutely.
little by little, you can get part of that load off here and there.
Yeah.
And that's what the conversation, like the courage it takes to break through that barrier of, I need to talk about this to somebody. Sometimes it's so private, we have to
Mm-hmm.
go to the therapist, right?
Right.
Because
You don't
we
want to
have
tell
to.
air
This
your
is a
dirty
professional
laundry.
situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, I've been there. I'm there right now. I'm doing grief counseling, from all of this that's happened to
Good.
me, and it's benefiting me a lot. Or I've realized, like, I haven't really been living a life. Like, I just hunkered down, and I'm in
Mm-hmm.
survival mode, just doing, and it's time to, like, I gotta
Snow.
not survive. I've got to start to
Yeah.
thrive, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's what my therapist told me. He goes, it sounds like a good uh, storyline for a book, Marky, from surviving to thriving. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and that sticks in my head because I want to begin to start thriving.
And what's hard about that is because I'm going through the same. Is like you have to face the traumas and process it and move on from that. And when you're going through that process, it's so hard because you're thinking about it, like you kind of like push it off to the side
Yeah.
as far back as you can possibly push it, and bringing those traumas or issues back in and having to talk about it is hard, but it gets you through it.
Yes.
You can process it a little better because like when you're a child, you keep trying to block it out, and then as an adult, you're trying to address it, work through it, realize okay, it wasn't really me. Whatever the circumstances was, address it and move on.
And move on.
Just like lighten your load, man.
Have you ever done the kind of like exercise where you go into meditation and you literally like go back and revisit the younger
EMDR?
versions of yourself?
I think it's EMDR.
Is it? I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
what it's called.
But yes, yeah.
That's
I just
powerful.
started recently
I
doing
just
that.
did it not too long ago
Me
too.
too.
And I cried,
Oh,
but I came out of that moment with so much respect for myself. And on those versions of myself that I have tried to hide because I was ashamed
right. Yeah.
of them, but by revisiting from the place I am now and acknowledging that without that 30-year-old mother, struggling with addiction, because why? Because she was the 14-year-old that suffered, abuse and a trauma, and one cycle, and we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
Right. So it goes back to like boundaries, setting boundaries,
Oh, yeah. Setting boundaries.
We didn't know how to set boundaries back then, right? No. And we just got all this life just chucking hardballs at us, and we're like, whoa,
Right.
And so you go back and you're like, well, no wonder.
Yeah, you got to keep your peace.
Yeah.
You got to set those boundaries. Like, every time I talk to this person, it causes issues. And so I'm putting up a boundary. I'm putting boundaries up all over the place. Like, I'll love you from a distance.
Right.
But every time I get close, like, something happens and it breaks my heart again. And I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
So I can still love you.
Right.
But I don't have to be close to you
right.
to love you. I can love you from a distance.
So this analogy like occurred to me last night. I was on the road late. And I started thinking of like life at 50. And to me, it's like a big chessboard. And all these spots on this board are available for the people that are in my life. And some people you're going to keep close because they're going to protect you.
Right. Yeah.
And some people are in your life because you are there to protect them.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Your children, your grandchildren, whatever, your spouse, whatever it is. And then we have these other people around. And we're constantly coming in contact with people. We interact with them on some level. But it don't mean they actually get a space on your board.
Right.
That's your boundary.
Exactly.
Do you get on my board? Do you make it on my board? Because if you did, now where are you going to be? And then how am I going to keep you there until we decide that maybe we're going to move to a closer position or something? And so 50-year-old me is starting to figure it out.
Yeah, right.
14-year-old me was clueless, and I was just, and what, youth, you want to fit in so bad.
Yeah. I've never wanted to fit in.
Really? Oh, I think I felt very, I think 14-year-old me was strong and independent. I was tough. I was working on a ranch. I left home. I quit school, and I was that girl. But I still was, I don't know if I wanted to fit in or I was just, like lonely surviving and didn't know how to like stranger danger, you know? Yeah. So I think I fell kind of prey to a lot of bullshit from crappy people,
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to advocate for myself.
Of course not. Yeah.
And I think as I grew, I became more of an advocate for other people, right? I would see people going through these things that I had experienced. I'm like, no, bullshit.
Yeah.
Leave them alone.
Right.
Get out. Don't listen to them. And I get really like into that. And then it's somewhere later in the game, I'm like, whoa, I'm going to advocate for me now. And then that's when it gets powerful.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're like,
I advocated for everybody else but me.
Right.
Like my husband and his ex-wife and the kids and what was going on and how she was alienating them. Like, I was like, oh, hell no. Like, this is crap. I stood up and he told me that, like, that was one of the things that he admired most about me was I fought for him. And I fight for a lot of people.
Right.
But I never fought for myself.
Same.
Isn't that crazy?
Same. Yeah.
That's bizarre. And I never thought about that until recently.
Now, let's talk about this. Do you have anyone that advocated for you? That when you look back, can you think of a person that was like, listen?
My older sister would.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
So I had an aunt who advocated for me, to me, you know. I wouldn't really say that she picked up the sword and fought, but she may have. You know, I'm not saying she didn't.
Right.
But what I do recall is she would really sit me down on her porch and advocate to me for me. This might be a good deal for so-and-so. Marky, is it a good deal for you? And it was really hard for me to be like, but, you know, what if it's not? It's good for them.
Right. Yeah.
You know? I mean, that's not always wise.
Last.
Yeah, right. So that wasn't great. And, you know, I went through a lawsuit in my early 20s. And I had some people really, and they, you know, they took kind of gross advantage of me and my situation. But, you know, things come out. We did the trial here in Reno. And I won. But the attorney was female. Mm-hmm. And I hope to get her on the podcast. So Margot Peskovich, if
she's retired.
I know, I want her. I want her on here.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a big deal. But she heard my story, and this is in 1998.
Wow.
Yeah, she heard my story, and I was just this young girl, you know, and I'm telling what happened, and in her office, and she goes, she's listening intently, actively listening, and goes, I wasn't going to take your case. She goes, but nobody is going to treat a woman like that.
Aww.
And I went, what? Because growing up in a male dominant environment, it is kind of like, and I don't mean to sound like a baby, but women can take last place. I mean, we get up in the morning, we cook breakfast for the crew. They go, they eat, they sit there and bullshit, drink coffee.
You're in the background.
You're in the background. They eat. You do the dishes. They go out and saddle up their horses. You rush through the dishes. You go out and saddle up your horse. You work right alongside of them all day long.
Yep.
You get home and you start dinner while they sit around and tell their cowboy war stories, you know. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they're entertaining. So we didn't have TV. I was okay with it, you know, but we worked hard.
Right.
And so I never, in that group, in that culture that I grew up in, I never had a woman be like, nobody's going to treat a woman like that.
Oh, yeah, me neither.
No.
Yeah.
So when I heard this woman say this, I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to do it?
How's this work?
Yeah. So she, you know, she's a magnificent attorney. You know that from being in the legal field around here. And she sat down one night. We sat down at some fancy bar. Did there used to be a Flamingo here in Reno?
Yeah, like a casino.
Yeah,
thing.
and I had a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
That's where she got my room at. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm this little country chick, like, you know, never experienced these things. And I'm sitting there with this very classy woman, and she's so articulate, intelligent, successful.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, whoa, you know, I'm just taken in by her. And she's drinking this fancy glass of white wine. And she tells me, she says, you have a story to tell. And I hope you write a book about it one day.
Oh.
Yeah, she did.
Wow.
And we won.
Good.
We went to court. We kicked their ass. And we won.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So she's an awesome woman. And I do hope that we get her on the podcast someday. But that was a big thing for me where somebody advocated for me. She literally like scooped me out of the dirt.
Wow.
Come on, dust yourself off. We're going to do this. Because she believed in me. And she told me that. She goes, I could see the truth in your story. You weren't lying. And I was not lying.
Right.
You know?
Wow.
Was I perfect? No, I was not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I was this little girl growing up on this ranch, working like a dog.
Being taken advantage of.
Yeah. Sure. Well, at the end, you know, when John died, I was very there was a lot of hatred there for me. Jealousy. Um, I don't want to throw out ugly words, but like, just greed and jealousy and a lot of misunderstandings, I think, of who I was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to fight for what was mine.
Right.
Essentially.
And she helped
and
you through it.
and I didn't even think that I was going to fight for that much. I just wanted them to leave me alone and let me keep my car. Don't take my car. And she was like, "Oh, hell no."
Wow.
There's way more than that. So that really gave me the financial boost, for me to kind of like, see myself through from one phase to the next. But there's been some really low lows where that money was tied up.
Right.
And it wasn't accessible, thank God, because I probably wouldn't have any of it left anymore.
Right.
And things, but so that was those are some people who helped me, and
that's pretty impressive.
Little nuggets of, information and experience and knowledge that I was able to store away, even though I completely like fouled out several times after that. It wasn't the magic cure.
Like the puzzle comes together, and you're like, oh, like a light turns on.
Yes,
it all makes sense.
And we get so wrapped up in the moment of things,
right?
That the fight, the struggle, that we get so wrapped up in that we cannot really comprehend or visualize a future without this problem. We're fixated on the problem.
Like, this is it.
And that's where we come in collectively as the people on the chessboard. Listen to me. Let me help you. Would you listen to this one experience that I had? It may help you, but also having the strength to be like, hey, I'm struggling.
Yeah, that's
and
hard.
It may be embarrassing to talk about, but maybe you got like, oh, and this brings me to the thought, the people that we keep around.
Oh, yeah.
You can have somebody that you call your best friend, and they are not so much that. And they will cause you more problems by sharing your, right? You got to choose wisely who you're going to have around. But having the courage to talk about what you're going through, to give someone else the courage to be like, oh, wow, interesting. I actually went through that 15 years ago.
Right.
I never talked about it.
Yeah.
And this is what made it go really, really wrong. Or this is what didn't help.
Yeah. Don't do this.
Yeah, and by the grace of God, I wound up, I have those stories. I made every wrong move.
Right, me too.
There, in some ways, I shouldn't even be here today,
me
but
too.
I am.
Yeah.
So can you? You can be here 15 years from now too, no matter what you're struggling with. If it's addiction, abuse, whatever, trauma, these things, they're I wouldn't say maybe always fixable. I think we always may carry a part of that with us, but we can overcome it.
You grow from it.
Yeah.
You learn from it. You help others through what you've been through, right? You kind of understand what they're going through, and you can be compassionate and understanding, at least on a superficial level.
Yeah.
Although it may not be similar to, what they're going through, you have an idea.
Yeah.
And you know what got you through, and you can help others get through things because you've been through it.
Yeah.
Eventually, because somebody helped you get through it, like Margot.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And let's talk about tying our self-worth to our productivity, because that's been a huge struggle for me.
Explain that.
I still struggle with it. Like, my self-worth, being able to relax is very hard for me. Being able to just say, I'm taking the day off.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in my pajamas all day, and I'm going to own it. I'm not. I feel like I've constantly got to be in hustle mode.
Me too.
To be able to have self-worth.
Right. I feel like a bum if I'm sitting on the couch. Like, I can't do it. I have to absolutely do something all day long. Otherwise, I just feel like a bump on a log.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to always be doing something.
Yeah.
I have to tidy something up or doing a load of laundry. And my husband's always like, why do you don't have to do anything. Like, there's nothing that you have to do. And I'm like, oh, I have a whole list of things to do. I have to do it. Even though I'm exhausted and I don't really want to. He's like, why?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it anxiety that I feel like I have to constantly be doing something all the time?
It is anxiety. And so that, and then that makes me think about like self-care, you know? So if you're just exhausted and you actually literally do need a break, you know, does it, and I found for myself, I can justify it a little easier if I do a little bit of things that I've wanted to do for me, you know, whether it's a long soak in the bathtub or, you know, self-tan. It could be anything.
Right, anything.
Self-care. Yeah. Do your nails, do whatever, right?
Yeah.
But still relax.
Yeah.
Go ahead and DoorDash.
So hard.
And yeah, I love DoorDash.
Me too.
But
a little too much.
I know, me too.
Probably be doing it tonight.
Me too. But you know, I think that is that setting those boundaries and not having our self-worth tied to our level of productivity is really that when you are on that level, that is a sign of your growth and that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, you're actually, so you got your little chessboard, you got your little players on your board, and you're protecting some and some are protecting you and some are networking with you, and some of them there's just this common respect and you can go to each other and be open and share and communicate. That's so powerful when you find people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody needs that.
Yeah, we got to have people.
You need your tribe
that uplift us, but as important, we've got to have people that rely on us to uplift them, because that really gives us a sense of purpose. And you know, we didn't just go through all this for nothing. Right.
Yeah.
We have strength and stories to share.
Yeah, and everything you go through is a learning opportunity, and you just have to work through it and kind of figure out, why is God bringing me through this? Or why is this happening to me? Everything happens for a reason. You may not see it in that moment, but you'll look back one day and be like, wow, I went through that and this came from it. Yeah. So, I mean, you don't grow otherwise, right?
And when you really can flip the script on these situations and be like, how can I maximize the quality of my life off of this?
Right.
Because life is not always just roses. We all know that.
Yeah.
There are some pretty harsh, rainy days, and they come, in my opinion, more often than not.
Yeah.
And but when you learn to stand and be like, how can I maximize off of this experience right here, where I'm going to utilize this in the future for myself, or share it with others to help them, right, grow. And one thing I think is another thing that's important is to be able to have the strength to tell people, you know, when you were going through that, and I was watching you, and I was so proud of you, and I was rooting for you, and I learned a lot from how graciously you handled that situation.
Oh, absolutely.
When you can share that with somebody, my God, when somebody shares that with you, it's like, yes.
Yeah, you know? I always look at them as an example, because there are people so much stronger than I am.
Yes.
And I look at like the the tragedies that they go through, and I'm like, how did you get through that? Like, how, you know, here I am complaining about something that seems so minor, and you went through this and you handled it so well, and you brought yourself through it, and you came out through the other side. And if you can do that, I can do that.
Yes.
Or anyone can do that.
Yeah. Exhibiting grace and love and peace and kindness instead of creating more chaos.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've all been guilty of that.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so, you know, and that's a good place for all of us to look at, like, how do we lift up people now? You know, where do we stand in that realm of being a light, a source of light in people that are like really struggling with the darkness? And do you go out of your way to help someone lighten their load? And like back to the boundaries, like where what are you willing to do to help someone, even if it's just talking or listening. So we would love to hear from everyone,
Yeah.
and get encouraging messages for our other listeners who are going through it. I mean, that's what this
Yeah.
is about. We're networking together to grow.
Absolutely. So if you're listening and you're carrying something heavy, just know that you're not alone. The weight might be real, but so is your strength, and you can get through it.
Yeah, so like I said, we'd love to hear your story. Send us your messages. Let us know. Just share your story with us, and let us know if it's just something, if you'd like to remain anonymous, or if you wouldn't mind us sharing it on a future episode, or maybe even possibly having you come in as a guest,
Mm-hmm.
and just to work together collectively to help.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So thanks for sitting us today. Be strong,
Stay
stay kind,
kind,
and
and
stay
stay
battle
battle
born.
born.
Okay. I feel like that was really long.
It was, but
Oh, we actually
so do I
recorded
push
it.
this?
Yeah.